Salutations, respected viewers. This is George from Ireland. Here I am in front of HMS Victory, as in His Majesty's ship Victory. So it was launched in 1768, having been ordered 7 years prior to that. Though bizarrely, it was only commissioned about 10 years after it was actually launched. There we are. So this ship is most renowned for having been the flagship of the Royal Navy and having been present at the Battle of Trafalgar. You see a Royal Naval officer behind me. Anyway, this was where Admiral Lord Horatio Nelson served and indeed died in October 1805, that battle off Cape Trafalgar in Portugal. He was fighting against the combined French and Spanish fleet because Spain was under the thumb of France at the time. The imbecile king of the Spanish had been pushed out and replaced with Napoleon Bonaparte's brother Joseph as King of Spain. So that was that. So it was a decisive Royal Naval victory, and it was very important because France and Spain were planning to invade the United Kingdom, massing forces at Boulogne. And had they done so, history could have been very difficult. As Napoleon said at the time, "Give me the Straits of Dover for 6 hours, and I shall give you the world." Because he thought if he could get enough troops landed in Great Britain, he'd defeat the British Army quite easily. He probably would have. He was considered a military genius. The French army was thought to be the best in the world at the time. Then that would have been that, and there would have been a Napoleonic system here. No doubt he would have put one of his siblings on the throne of Great Britain. So that was that. It was a very overwhelming victory, and the Royal Navy didn't lose any ships. Despite being outnumbered, the French and Spanish lost the majority of their ships, and a French sniper managed to kill Horatio Nelson. So up there they would have had miles of rigging which have been taken down since, and they had a way of signalling to other ships. Obviously this is decades before radio came along. Various flags which mean things, and they spelt out England expects that every man will do his duty before the Battle of Trafalgar. And when he heard he was wounded, it took him a few hours to die. When he heard they'd won, he said, "Thank God I've done my duty." Well, stirring words indeed. I wonder if it was something more prosaic. And his last words were supposedly "kiss me, Hardy," to one of his officers. Though some people think perhaps he was saying "kismet," as in fate in Turkish. Having spent a long time in the Mediterranean, he may have picked up a smattering of Turkish. You can see the Union flag at the back. So the Union flag is only called the Union Jack when flown from the jack deck of a ship, and that may be it. At the front they've got the white ensign, which is the flag of the Royal Navy, a white field, a red cross, and in the ensign, as in the top left-hand corner, they have the Union flag. So it looks suspiciously like the cross of St. George, but obviously the Royal Navy is for Northern Ireland, Wales, Scotland and England, not just England. So you can see the gun ports with many cannon going through there. So it had a long and illustrious service life, this ship, and was in service in some form till 1812 on the high seas. Thereafter it was docked here at Portsmouth, and it was used as more or less as an admiral's office. It was used as a naval training school, but its physical condition deteriorated very considerably. Difficult to preserve it in those days. In about 1832 there was thought of breaking it up and just selling off the timber or reusing it. Look at that, look at the very rear of it for that mast. But anyway, there's a huge outcry against doing so. So eventually it was preserved, and after the 1920s it was turned into a charitable trust, and here you can walk around it. And you can see the size of the anchors, gives you some idea of the scale of the thing. So it was a 100 gunner, well, had 104 guns to be more accurate. What else? Well, Nelson, he was brought back in a barrel. He was preserved in a barrel of some alcohol and brought back to St. Paul's Cathedral. He had a state funeral because he was a national hero. He was the deliverer of the country. Had it not been for him, it may well have been ruled by France. Might have been better off, actually, with a better system of government under the French. I mean, the political and economic system at the time was not really to the advantage of most people here who dwelt in terrible poverty and had very limited political rights, and the freedom of expression has been severely circumscribed under all this sort of anti-revolutionary legislation. So I've been on the ship again. I shan't go on it today. You can see the rigging they had to climb up to the crow's nest, adjusting the sails when they were under power. Obviously in the age of sail, some decades before the age of steam, and then from about the 1850s steamships came along, and suddenly ships like this were old hat. They were obsolescent. They were ironclad warships. Certainly the American Civil War in the 1860s, not the United Kingdom was a belligerent, but then as they had iron sides, you had to have more powerful guns to break them. You see the officers' cabins at the back. with the big windows. So they would give each other broadsides, as in you could fire all your guns on one side of the ship. And rather than lining up your ships of the line and bombarding, Nelson had his idea, Nelson's touch, to attack and break through the enemy line. So you could broadside them, and if you could get behind a ship here, these cabins were very inviting targets, and there are no cannon there. Shouldn't they put cannon there? And if you get a cannonball in there, go down the length of the ship and do a lot more damage. And you can see these male figures there. Oh, you can see lanterns up top, and what else do I see? The three feathers of the Prince of Wales, the Wordzichten, the Union flag, the white ensign, the cross of St George, and more. So that is HMS Victory, well worth going around. So the royal family had more of an association with the Royal Navy than the Army. Notice it's not called the Royal Army, and they often spent time down at Dartmouth as Royal Naval cadets, certainly from Edward VII onwards. And George V had a quarter-deck voice and salty sailor slang. So I don't know what you call that bit under the hull, the keel, something like that. My God, it's got such a draft. A draft is in how much water it draws, how deep below the surface of the water it goes. Obviously, can't go too deep because it slows it down, or even a capsize. But mustn't be too high in the water because then it's too, what was the word? Be almost volatile. Could too easily tip over. So got to get the right level, the right depth. Anything else about HMS Victory? Yes, King George V was being shown around it in the 1920s. And the officer guiding him said, "And that, Your Majesty, is the spot where Admiral Lord Nelson fell." And the king said, "Well, I'm not surprised. I almost tripped over it myself." I'm not sure he was being quick-witted. I think he was being dim-witted, not realising that Nelson had been killed in that precise spot. That's what he was alluding to. So well worth coming down here to Portsmouth, the headquarters of the Royal Navy, and seeing this sort of thing. So the Royal Navy used to be much bigger, and so a lot of these buildings were used by the Royal Navy to store things, to stay in when they weren't at sea, and some of it still is used at these docks. Okay, I shall switch it off now.